On this day in history in 2013, a Charleston-area custody fight landed in one of the most powerful rooms in America, the United States Supreme Court. After an hour and a half of emotional oral arguments, the justices took up the Baby Veronica case. It was a battle over a 3-year-old girl whose South Carolina adoptive parents were fighting her Cherokee biological father for custody. This was under the Indian Child Welfare Act. Supporters on both sides watched as lawyers argued 3 key questions: whether Dustin Brown counted as a parent under ICWA, whether the law only applied when there was already an Indian family in place, and whether parts of the law were constitutional at all. 2 months later, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that several core ICWA protections did not apply to a non-custodial Native American father when the child had never lived with him, and sent that case back to South Carolina. By that fall, after more legal wrangling in South Carolina and Oklahoma, Baby Veronica was returned to her adoptive parents on James Island, ending one of the most closely watched custody and tribal rights cases in decades.